Hi guys, Philip Good here again. I am an abuse recovery specialist and a relationship coach. This video is a continuation of my book, Ignited by the Bottle, Delivered by the Fist. And this is a continuation. This is chapter 5. I'm going to talk it through. Chapter 5 is, again, it's a continuation of the previous chapter, chapter 4, about me and Grandpa. And this is entitled, Me and Grandpa Go to the Farm. So just to refresh, my grandpa I consider was more like my dad than my father. I always felt the love for my grandfather. He lived with us until he passed away when I was 11. I was the eldest of 6 children. And but he was always kind, gentle, generous, and a really loving person. And so I always felt the love between he and I. As did my siblings, my 3 brothers. My sisters never knew him. They were much younger, and he had already passed before they were born. But anyway, like I said in the previous video, I was his constant companion, because my grandmother died when she was 50, so I never knew her. And Grandpa was on his own for many, many years. And so I was his companion when I come on the scene, and at 5 or 6 years of age, I'd be his companion, go down to the shops, like I mentioned in the previous video, go to the horse races because he loved horses. And but anyway, he had best friends that used to live. Our grandfather used to live in what you call Henamoa Street in Birkenhead, and his best friends, Lil and Claude, they lived not very far away, and they were best friends for years. And they also knew my grandmother as well. But anyway, Lil and Claude sold their house and they purchased a small farm at Riverhead, just north of Auckland. And it wasn't a huge farm. It was a farm they actually milked about 23 dairy cows through about a 4 or about a 6 bale walk-through cowshed, one of the old vintage varieties, and which was quite a revelation for myself, having been a dairy farmer, for 46, 47 years, and going back to those first childhood experiences when I was, 6 and 7 and so on. But sort of, during the school holidays, though, Grandpa would say to my parents, like, I'd like to go up and stay with Lil and Claude on the farm, and Phil can come along with me and I'll look after him. And more often than that, not, my father would say, oh, no, he can stay home, you go on your own, Dad. And my grandfather would fight for me, actually, and say, no, it's quite okay, I'll look after him, he'll be fine with me. And so my father and mother would relent and say, that's okay, Phil can go. And that was probably the only time, during these excursions to the farm, was probably the only time that I, as a little boy, that I cried, and that if I wasn't allowed to go, and Grandpa would fight all the more for me to allow me to go, type thing. So it was very special. But anyway, the farm that Lil and Claude purchased was not a big farm, but they ran 23 cows. They had ducks, and but it was mainly a poultry farm, and they had about 4,000 hens, laying hens. And my grandfather, actually, when they purchased the farm, my grandfather actually built, because he was a builder, carpenter, coach builder, and all that sort of thing by trade. And he actually built them, the fowl houses, the chook houses, elevated up quite high off the ground type thing, and about enough to accommodate 4,000 chooks. So that was their main source of income on the farm. And anyway, and so I would go up there and stay with Grandpa and at their house and so on. And we stayed on a pull-out couch in the lounge room. Always remember that. And of course, I became Uncle Claude's best mate, and because I didn't have Little Claude did not have children, and so it was a very special time for me. Not only was with one of my favourite people in the world, my grandfather, who I'm very, very close to and love so much. But I became very close to little Claude. I was like the son or the child they never had, and that's how they treated me. So I felt very, very special, and it was an honour and a privilege to be able to go and stay with them on the farm and so on with my granddad. But anyway, quite often when you go down and milk the cows, Uncle Claude would get up in the morning because he milked cows night and morning, of course, and he'd get up very early in the morning to go and milk the cows and so on, and he had a black beret, and of course Auntie Law bought me one as well, so it was like Dan and Dave. Uncle Claude had his black beret on, and I had mine on as well. So I looked the part, right? So I'm a farmer like Uncle Claude, a dairy farmer, right? And a chook farmer as well. So, but anyway, he would have Uncle Claude when he got up in the morning, he'd have to get his garb on and so on, and then creep down because it was like a sunken lounge room. So walk down over the carpet, down 2 steps, and out through the French doors onto a patio area where he had his gumboots, and they're ready to go down to the farm to get the cows in for milking. And of course, I'd pretend he would go very quietly, so he's trying to not wake myself up or my granddad. And and then, but I would always have my I'd always have my clothes all ready to put on, my beret all set. And when Uncle Claude went out the French doors, I would quickly hop up and pull my clothes on. And by the time Uncle Claude had walked about halfway down the paddock towards the cowshed, I'd already caught up to him with my black beret on. And then we walked down because it was funny. It was the cowshed, and they had a holding paddock out from the cowshed, and then had a night paddock and then a day paddock further back on the farm. And it was just 2 paddocks, a day and a night paddock. Was, which is dairy farm, it always makes me grin because normally you have a lot of paddocks and all subdivided and cows rotated around. One, it's maybe on a 20 to 30 day rotation depending on the season or time of year. And anyway, I'd walk down Uncle Claude to get the cows, and he'd have a torch, and because it'd be dark, and I'd follow behind him as well, or follow alongside him, and quite often this paddock, the night paddock, had a flat piece that had quite a steep hill decline, and it was all cow tracks all around that hillside, where the cows would walk around the tracks and then up the hill to go to the cowshed. And down the bottom there was like a swampy bit. There's like a swamp at the bottom of the hill. Was like a swampy bit with big bulrushes and so on, and then a higher piece, a flat piece with grass and stuff. So quite often we'd have to walk down the hill and across the swampy bit to get the cows up and get them up in the morning and get them walking towards the cowshed. And it used to be quite hard case really to see Uncle Claude. He had all the cows were pets and they all had names, right? And all different ages. They all had horns, all different shapes. And the cows were all different colours, from red to brown to red and white, to black and so on, so, and straight red, all these different sort of cows, and they all had names and so on. But anyway, I had this an old Jersey cow that was a brown coloured cow. And she was especially, quiet, Uncle Claude's pet. And as she walked up the hill, Uncle Claude would sort of grab hold of her tail as she walked on along the cow tracks and up the hill, and he'd hold onto her tail, and she'd sort of pull him up the hill type thing, because I suppose he would have been late 50s, 60 odd or something like that, at that time. My grandfather's close to, he was in his early 70s. And so the cow would pull him up the hill, and I'd sort of Uncle Claude would be holding the tail of the cow, and I'd be holding Uncle Claude. So, and that's how we got up the hill. But it was quite classic and quite funny when and to remember back, all those great things. and then we'd get them up, the cows up the hill, the 22, 23 cows up the hill, and he'd close the gate in the halting paddock, and he'd just leave them there. Normally, when I wasn't there, he'd take them all into the cowshed yards, put them in the yard together. But when I was there, he would would go and get them in sort of like one at a time. And I can remember times there when he'd say, "Oh, go and get in this cow called Jackie," and she had a jersey. She was brown and she had a black face and she had horns that sort of came out and around like this. And anyway, I went out there to get Jackie in, and on this one occasion, and she, when I went out there, she went bang with her head and said, "Like, I'm not going to the cowshed. I'm not going with you. Who are you? Do you think you are? You're only a little tot, and I'm a big cow, so I'm not going to go with you." And so I went back into the cowshed and told Uncle Claude, and he said, "Oh, okay, yeah." He said, here's the length of, it was a bit of half-inch alkathene pipe, like polythene pipe. And he said, when she goes to shake her head at you, like if she doesn't want to go, just give her a little tap on the horn. And you give her a little tap on the horn, and sure enough, she'll say, "Oh, gee, I'll be get going." And sure enough, I went and did that. And yeah, it worked, So I thought I was a kingpin, I was the man, I was at this, I'm a dairy farmer, right? And I was about 6, 7 years old. And so then I remember another occasion that Uncle Claude said to go out and get this cow called Linda in, and she was a big Ayrshire cow. She was a red and white cow, and big cow. And anyway, I went out there, and there was another since she was, getting up on another cow, and I thought, gee, what's this all about, So, and she and I'm mucking around, and she and another cow and stuff. And I thought, gee, there's something going on here. So she wouldn't go with me. So anyway, all of a sudden, so I went back into the cowshed and told Uncle Claude. I said to him, I think Linda's a bit tired. And he said, "Oh, why's that?" And I said, "Oh, well, she's actually riding another cow. And I think she might be a bit tired." And he said, "Oh, no, no, no." So you go out and take that bit of half-inch alkathene pipe with you and give him a bit of a tap, and she'll come in. And sure enough, she came in, and the other cow came in with her, and when I got back into the cowshed with these two cows, I said, "Oh, yeah, at the end of milking, we'll just put her out that side gate and we'll put her in with the bull until the afternoon." I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, right, yeah, that's good." But anyway, those were really special and fun times. I can imagine Uncle Claude laughing away when I wasn't there, about all these hard case things that I would come in from the paddock with and say to him. But it was fun. They had a cow called Nana, right? And she was another old Jersey cow, and she'd go and stand in the dairy. This is in the dairy was the place where the milk would come along the top line into an open vat type thing. Milk would fall into there, and then we had centrifugal plates that would separate the cream from milk. So we had these were back in the days, late 50s, early 60s. We had cream cans. We had a cream can on one side and a skim milk can on the other side. The skim milk can would go basically to the chooks. He'd keep it in big drums and that, and it would form a curd on top, and he'd scrape off the curds and give that to mix that with the chook food, like with bread and mash and all that sort of thing. And they'd have it hot, hot water in a mix in a big wooden trough. But anyway, the milk would come into these centrifugal plates and to the vat centrifugal plates, and it would separate. So the cream would pour into one can and skim milk into the other. And the cream, of course, was what was sold. And I can remember putting Uncle Claude putting the cream can on a wheelbarrow for me, and I would use the wheelbarrow and wheelbarrow that out to the gate, there was a little platform there, wooden platform, where you put the cream can on, and the cream and a lorry would come and pick up the full can and leave you with an empty one. And so that was one of my jobs. And but yeah, so those are the sort of things that we did, and I learned how to leg rope a cow as well, and put the cups on a cow, to be milked, and all that sort of thing at 6 and 7 years of age. So I thought I was really the real dairy farmer, right? But like I was talking about before, they had this cow called Nana, and she would go and wait out in the dairy. She'd go through a little side gate and wait out in the dairy for my Auntie Lil to arrive. And Auntie Lil she was under 5 foot, probably about 4'10", a little lady with a huge, big smile. And, she always had a smile on her face, such a happy, beautiful little lady. I loved her to bits, and she thought I was a cat's pajamas, or cat's whiskers. But anyway, she was a great cook, great bake, and she used to bake a lot of cakes. And this particular cow, Nana, would not go up to be milked into a bale to be milked until she had her cake. And she'd just wait patiently, chewing her cud, out in the dairy, waiting for Auntie Lil to arrive. And I always remember, hearing Auntie Lil arriving, and this little lady with a huge, big voice, and, "Oh, sorry, Nana, I'm sorry I'm late. Here's your cake." And she'd go and open the tin and give her a cake, and then as soon as Nana got the cake, she'd back out of the dairy and go up into the bale ready to be milked. So, so that's what that was like. She was very, very special. But yeah, I can remember Uncle Claude. Uncle Claude and Grandpa were doing different jobs on the farm, and me tagging along as well. And they had this VW combi van, right? And we used to go in once a week. They used to go in and take their eggs, and because it was a poultry farm mainly, that was mainly their business. They would take crates of eggs and to what they call this place called Northern Roller Mills for the eggs to be traded there, sold there, and then Northern Roller Mills also provided. They also sold wheat, bags of wheat, sacks of wheat, and sacks of mash and things like that. So Uncle Claude would pick all those up. Then he had a couple of bakeries that he knew of that threw out surplus bread, like surplus bread that was, past the point of selling it or whatever. So these wholesale bakeries. And anyway, he'd go and fill up his whole over the top of the sacks, fill up the combi van with all his bread pretty much right to the rafters of the combi van. And I would lay on top of all the fresh bread, having a munch now and again if it was something that was really enticing. And Auntie Lil and Uncle Claude, they weren't my blood relatives, by the way, they were just my grandpa's best friends, but I used to call them Auntie Lil and Uncle Claude, and they treated me like a son, like a prince, I guess. I loved them to bits, and I knew they loved me as well. And saw these things in times with my grandfather and times with Auntie Lil and Uncle Claude was light in amongst the darkness that I had at home, in normal daily life with my mum and dad, particularly with my dad. A lot of darkness and violence, as I've said in previous videos, coming from him. So I realised there was a difference, people did live differently, like Auntie Lil and Uncle Claude did, and I used to think at different times, like I got a bit older, like was it unfair that Auntie Lil and Uncle Claude were beautiful people, had made fantastic parents, yet they weren't able to have children. And whereas my dad, like he had 4 sons, then 2 daughters, and but you don't want to spend time with him, never. Me personally, I didn't feel the love from him at all, quite the opposite, in fact. But anyway, getting back to the story though, the combi van, and Auntie Lil and Uncle Claude would buy fish and chips and potato, flats, flour patties, flapjacks, whatever you call them, and potato cakes and fish and chips and stuff. So on the way home from the Northern Roller Mills and dropping off the eggs and picking up the mash and the wheat and the bread, we'd have fish and chips on the way home, you know. So yeah, I thought I was a real prince, you know. I thought, oh man, I thought this is the life. And so, you know, I used to have a big feed and got home, and then it all start over again, right? So you go and get the cows in and start milking and all the rest of it. So those were really, really happy times that I had with Auntie Michael Claude and my granddad, my grandfather, you know, and he, like I said, he passed when I was 11. So, so probably I can remember the times from about 6 to 10, you know, so for 4 years. So I'd go there often in many school holidays, not just the Christmas holidays, but there's August and May holidays as well. But quite often we go there during the school holidays and spend time with them and on the farm with the animals and stuff. And Uncle Claude would give me, he gave me his slug gun as well. So, of course, with his chooks and mash, there's a lot of rats and stuff like that. So, you know, I used to go and shoot rats and stuff. And I can remember one time Uncle Claude had guests staying, or guests arriving for the day, just for a lunch, I think. And anyway, I went down to the chook houses and I shot this huge big rat, had a body, you know, massive body on it, you know, and a huge long tail. And I can remember, I thought, wow, that's the biggest rat I think I've ever shot, you know. So I thought, I've got to go up and show it to you, Uncle Claude. So I remember walking up the hill towards the house and stuff, and I actually forgot about the fact that they're having guests for lunch, you know, because I was so busy doing what I was doing, you know, shooting rats. Because, you know, quite often my grandfather built sort of big mash bins, you know, like it was like they had lids on top, big wooden bins, and they had a bit of like, they were created in like a funnel, you know, so the mash would fill down into the trays below, and the chooks could get the mash and or the wheat, but mainly the mash in those bins. And yeah, and of course the rats would get in there as well, you know. So you lift up a lid, and you'd see rats scurrying left, right, and centre, you know. So anyway, I remember shooting this huge big rat. So I was very proud of myself. So I thought, oh, I'll take it up and show it to Uncle Claude. So I went up the hill with the rat, and I said, Uncle Claude, look what I shot. And of course the people that were there for lunch said, oh my God, look at that, the size of that. So I thought, oh, well, sorry, I know that wasn't quite the done thing, but I was only a kid, you know, it's only 7 or something. And but anyway, those sorts of stories. So these are stories were like, you know, the light in amongst the darkness, you know, very, very special times, you know, and I really treasure those memories. So, okay, guys, I'll leave it there, and it was really, this video again on the farm is like very, very special times for me, you know. It's like times that I really felt loved by my grandfather and Auntie and Uncle Claude as well, and felt very, very special. So I was very, very lucky to have enjoyed that time. Okay, guys, love you and leave you. I'll leave you with this. Leave this right now, and I'll start chapter 6 next. Okay, guys, love you and leave you. Bye for now.